The elegant dining room of the Chen mansion felt more like a courtroom than a family gathering. Emma's fingers drummed nervously against her wine glass as she watched her new stepsister meticulously dissect her salmon with surgical precision. Sophia Martinez's reputation preceded her, the youngest partner at Morton and Price, nicknamed the Ice Queen for her ability to freeze opposing counsel with a single raised eyebrow. "So, Emma," Sophia's voice cut through the awkward silence, "I heard your marketing campaign for Brighton Technologies went viral last week." The words were complimentary, but Emma caught the subtle challenge beneath them. 3 million views in 48 hours. Emma replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Almost as impressive as your winning streak in corporate law." Their parents exchanged nervous glances across the table. This wasn't how they'd imagined their first family dinner would go. The tension crescendoed when their father's phone buzzed. His face paled as he read the message. "The Carter account," he began, "is mine." Both women exclaimed simultaneously, half rising from their seats. The revelation hung in the air like a poisoned cloud. Emma's carefully crafted pitch for Carter Industries' new medical division and Sophia's meticulously prepared contract negotiations were now on a collision course. Their parents' hasty marriage had just become the least of their problems. As Emma locked eyes with her new stepsister, she realized this dinner wasn't just about blending families. It was about discovering whether they'd be allies or adversaries in the cutthroat world they both inhabited. The Carter Innovation Gala transformed the city's contemporary art museum into a glittering playground for the elite. Emma clutched her tablet closer, threading through the crowd in 4-inch heels that already made her regret watching those confidence-boosting TED talks. Her pitch had to be perfect. This was her one chance to prove herself without her father's influence. The universe, however, had other plans. "Watch out!" The warning came a split second too late. Emma collided with what felt like a wall in an expensive tuxedo, her tablet sailing through the air in slow motion. She watched in horror as it executed a perfect swan dive into a fountain of vintage champagne, taking her career aspirations down with it. "I suppose dropping technology in $1,000 champagne is one way to make an entrance," came an amused voice. Emma looked up to find Michael Carter, the younger, supposedly boring brother, extending a hand to help her up. His eyes sparkled with intelligence behind wire-rimmed glasses that somehow made him look more intriguing than nerdy. "I usually save the dramatics for the second meeting," Emma managed, accepting his help. To her surprise, Michael didn't just fish out her tablet. He grabbed a napkin and started sketching improvements to her marketing campaign that made her jaw drop. His quiet brilliance was interrupted by a commotion across the room. There stood Sophia, facing down Emma's biggest industry rival, who'd been caught photographing the ruined tablet screen. James Carter watched the confrontation with undisguised admiration as Sophia systematically demolished the competitor's reputation with the precision of a legal surgeon. For the first time, Emma realized having a shark for a stepsister might not be such a bad thing after all. Every society page in the city splashed photos of Sophia and James Carter's lunch dates across their covers. Emma watched her stepsister's practiced smile grow more genuine with each passing week, even as she discovered her own unexpected romance wasn't quite the fairy tale everyone thought. "My mother has certain expectations," Michael mentioned one evening in his lab, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his microscope. The usually steady scientist looked uncharacteristically nervous. "She's difficult when those expectations aren't met." Before Emma could probe further, her phone buzzed with an urgent text from her father. "Emergency. Carter auction. Come now." The annual Carter Family Charity Auction was already in full swing when Emma arrived. Sophia shot her a warning look from her seat beside James, but it came too late. Emma had already raised her paddle for Lot 47, a seemingly innocuous jade pendant. "Sold to Miss Chen for $1.2 million, the auctioneer announced. The room fell silent. Across the hall, Victoria Carter's face hardened into a mask of barely concealed fury. That's when Emma noticed the identical pendant around the Carter matriarch's neck. Later that night, Sophia received the call that would change everything. Her firm was being sued for malpractice, with evidence so perfectly fabricated it could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of her cases. "It's starting," Michael whispered when Emma told him, his face pale. "Mother always gets what she wants. Always." Paris glittered beneath the Eiffel Tower as James Carter dropped to one knee before Sophia. Camera flashes exploded around them, all carefully orchestrated by Victoria Carter's PR team. The diamond ring caught the sunset perfectly, and #Carter proposal trended worldwide within minutes. Back in their hotel suite, Sophia's hands shook as she downloaded the latest encrypted files from her firm's server. Between the photos and congratulatory messages, she'd discovered something in the malpractice suit that made her blood run cold. But before she could dig deeper, James walked in, his public smile slipping into something more uncertain. Meanwhile, in Michael's underground lab, Emma helped him adjust the settings on his latest prototype. She'd grown to love the organized chaos of his workspace, the whirring machines like a symphony of innovation. When the experimental gene therapy chamber began to pulse with an ominous red light, she barely had time to register Michael shouting, "Get down," before the explosion. She awoke in the ER with Michael clutching her hand, his face streaked with soot and blood. "Marry me," he blurted out, still dazed from the blast. "I know the timing's terrible, but I realized when that chamber exploded that I can't lose you." Before Emma could respond, her phone lit up with an anonymous message. "The Carter brothers' research disappeared 10 years ago. So did the scientist who created it. Ask Michael about Project Phoenix." Through the hospital window, she spotted a familiar figure watching, Victoria Carter, her jade pendant gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Victoria Carter's heels clicked against the marble floors of Carter Industries' boardroom like a countdown. "The company bylaws are clear," she announced, sliding identical folders to both couples. "Only one pair of hands can hold the reins." Sophia's legal training kicked in as she speed-read the document, her face growing paler with each page. The inheritance clause was buried in archaic language, but its meaning was crystal clear. The first couple to produce an heir would inherit controlling interest in Carter Industries. "Mother, this is medieval," Michael protested, but his voice wavered when Victoria's cold gaze fell on him. Later that night, Emma found him in his lab, surrounded by scattered research papers. His hands trembled as he injected another test sample. "The rival team published their results this morning," he whispered. "They're 6 months ahead of us." Across town, Sophia watched James pace their penthouse, his charm replaced by raw ambition. "Think about it," he insisted, running his fingers through disheveled hair. "With your legal expertise and my business connections, we could revolutionize the company. We just need to be first." "First to what, James? Have a baby for corporate gain." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Sophia's phone buzzed. A message from Emma. "Found something about Project Phoenix. Meet me at Mom's old house. Come alone." In her office, Victoria Carter smiled at her jade pendant's reflection, whispering, "Everything is proceeding as planned." The headline exploded across every major news outlet. "Cartier Industries Linky D to experiment." Sophia stared at the confidential files spread across her desk, each document more damning than the last. The whistleblower had provided irrefutable evidence, and James's signature was on everything. "We can make this disappear," James said, his usual polish cracking under pressure. "Your legal expertise, my connections." He placed his hand over hers, but Sophia felt only cold. "Think about our future." Meanwhile, Emma crouched behind a lab cabinet, watching Michael's research partner Dr. Wells methodically sabotage another experiment. Her phone silently recorded everything, including his hushed phone conversation. "Yes, Mrs. Carter, the data will be corrupted by morning." But it was the photograph Emma found in their mother's old study that changed everything. There she was, Elena Chen, brilliant geneticist, standing beside a younger Victoria Carter. Between them sat a jade pendant, identical to the one Victoria now wore, and a file labeled Project Phoenix, Human Genetic Enhancement. "Mom never died of natural causes, did she?" Emma asked when Sophia arrived. Their mother's research journal lay open between them, its final entry dated the day before her death. Victoria will stop at nothing. The ethical implications of Phoenix are too dangerous. I must destroy everything. A shadow fell across the doorway. I wondered when you'd find that, Victoria Carter said softly, both jade pendants now glowing with an unnatural light around her neck. The cathedral buzzed with whispers as two brides prepared in separate rooms. In the East Wing, Sophia stared at the USB drive containing evidence of James's illegal experiments, her wedding dress feeling more like armor than silk. Down the hall, Emma frantically decoded the final pages of her mother's journal, her veil pushed aside as she typed sequences into Michael's laptop. The jade pendants, Emma murmured, they're not just jewelry, they're keys to Mom's original research data. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Michael burst in, his bow tie askew. The cure works, he breathed. The genetic marker in your mother's research, it's the missing piece. But Victoria, she's planning something at the ceremony. Meanwhile, Sophia confronted James in the church garden. You knew, she said, holding up the evidence. You knew what your mother did to Elena Chen. Everything I did was for us, James pleaded, reaching for her. Your mother's research could have made us unstoppable. The wedding march began, but neither bride appeared. Instead, the doors flew open to reveal Emma and Sophia standing side by side. Victoria rose from her front row seat, both pendants pulsing with eerie light. Did you really think I'd let my sons marry Elena's daughters without a contingency plan? Victoria smiled. Project Phoenix wasn't about curing diseases. It was about control. The pendants suddenly flared, but something was different. Elena's final protocol, hidden in her daughter's DNA, had been waiting for this moment. As the light engulfed the cathedral, the truth about their mother's sacrifice finally came to light.